off a little bit slow. He had...
As a defense attorney defending men and women accused of crimes in the military. I'm very honored for that experience. I've served in the Air National Guard, representing men and women's legal interests during Desert Shield and Desert Storm with my unit. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to compliment you on two things. Over 50 years ago, when my father was in the Far East serving America in New Guinea, fighting the Japanese, you were in that part of the world serving America, protecting the Constitution, protecting the rule of law, risking your life, and we all owe a debt of gratitude to you and your generation for having done so. I think we owe a unique debt of gratitude to you now for having guided this committee somewhat under fire at a time when we're going to evaluate who we are as a people, how far we've come in 200 years. Have we made progress? Have we gone backwards? What's the state of the American people? What's the state of American political system? I will say this. The people who have fought and died should feel good. We're going to have a partisan vote, but that's okay. You have parties. You have political thought. You have political differences. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. A lot of people have fought and died, so you could have those differences. Let me share some thoughts about my colleagues, and we'll talk about the evidence and the truth. Mr. Frank has made a statement that I'd like to associate myself with. This is about the Monica Lewinsky episode. This is not about Whitewater. That has not been put at the feet of the President. This is not about Filegate. That was not put at the feet of the President. This is not about Travelgate. That was never put at the feet of the President. That's important. Quite frankly, I thought some of these things would mature into cases that would come before this committee. They did not. And we should not mislead people that we're voting on anything other than what happened in the Paula Jones sexual harassment lawsuit. And we'll all make a decision at the end of the day. Is that worth overturning a national election? Mr. Berman, I would like to associate myself with his comments. This is not all about sex, but is colored by sex. It certainly is. Mr. Rogan has told you about the sexual harassment nature that got us into this whole situation. I think he did so far better than I can comment because there are some important concepts. But in many ways, this is all about people. This is all about emotion. This is really all about one man, Bill Clinton. There's some really caster characters here, the Linda Tripps of the world, Ken Starr, whether you like him or not. There's some unique characters here, myself, whether you like me or not. But at the end of the day, we're here because of what Bill Clinton did or chose not to do. Mr. Barrett, I would like to associate myself with his spirit. He's a very nice man. He's got a child coming along, a new child to be brought in the world, and we all wish him well. He has tried to say to this committee, let's bring the country together. What a noble cause. Don't worry, Mr. Barrett, if we don't come together. This country is strong. We shall survive. Mr. Schumer, I admire him greatly because he believes the President lied to the grand jury, but he says in the context in which he lied, I do not believe it's a high crime or misdemeanor. I respect that reasoning. I disagree with it. No Democrat on this committee has ever suggested that the President's conduct...
Well, we do need to take a break, but Representatives Mary Bono and Henry Hyde, when we continue in just a moment.
Whatever differences we've had, there has been nobody...
Did you know harsh winter weather can leave even unexposed skin itchy and dry? Did you know moisturizers aren't always up to the challenge of itchy, dry skin? That's why there's new Cortisone 10 Plus.
Among these, only Cortisone 10 Plus has 10 moisturizers like aloe and vitamins, plus the power of Cortisone 10 to stop itch and help heal.
So for itchy patches of dry skin, even eczema or psoriasis, try new Cortisone 10 Plus.
Hey, little brother, what you eating? Condensed soup. You know, chicken and stars used to be my favorite, and then I learned to ride a two-wheeler. Come on, you're an adult now. There's a better tasting soup, Progresso Chicken Noodle, with all white meat chicken, bigger veggies, and seasonings with some real zip. See the difference?
Good stuff.
There's hope for you yet. Now let's talk about this shirt.
What?
Discover the better taste of Progresso.
Is your house a disaster area with everything breaking, cracking, and falling apart? Then you need Max 1, the maximum strength instant bonding kit. Watch, just one drop, and in just 2 seconds, these two men can't break the power of Max 1. Hey, don't throw that coffee cup away. Max 1 works so fast, you can save it to use right away. Now quickly connect plastic to glass and hang a towel. Or rescue a pair of $50 leather shoes that you can instantly use. Even impossible metal surfaces are no problem for the bonding power of Max 1. Use Max 1 to secure a tile, save a toy, bond leather belts and bands, to fix a chair, for car repairs. And because it dries clear, it's ideal for model makers, hobbyists, and craftsmen. Turn costly jewelry repair into money-saving, ready-to-wear. Whether it's porcelain, ceramic, or rubber, Max 1 bonds them all in no time at all. And it replaces all these other glues that can dry out. Max 1 bonds so fast and so strong, it can even pull this 3,000-pound truck without letting go. You'll save hundreds with Max 1 around. Plus, it comes with Max 1 Accelerator for those tough, porous materials to bond super strong in seconds. We'll also include a set of instant seal patches for repairing rafts, balls, and tires, and this tip extender for hard-to-reach jobs. The complete kit is yours for just $19.95. As a bonus, you'll receive Max 1 Surface Filler to fill in chips, cracks, and holes. And while supplies last, we'll include Max 1 Adhesive Remover to quickly lift up stickers, labels, and tape free. Use Max 1 for 30 days. Your satisfaction is unconditionally guaranteed. You get it all for only $19.95. So order now.
Call 1-800-457-1881 to order the 6-piece Max 1 Instant Glue Kit for only $19.95 and start saving hundreds of dollars. Your satisfaction is guaranteed. Order now. Call 1-800-457-1881.
Back to the hearings, Congressman Lindsey
I'm about
Graham.
to vote. I have yet to receive that. I don't know if I will ever get it. Bill Clinton's fate, ladies and gentlemen, is in Bill Clinton's hands. The biggest enemy of Bill Clinton, just like with all of us, is Bill Clinton. God knows he has many enemies. God knows he's a polarizing figure. God only knows what's in his heart. I'm having to judge Bill Clinton based on evidence. And I would like to speak a few minutes to what I believe is the unshakable, undeniable truth. And much of it is about sex. This idea that the President of the United States, when he testified in Paula Jones's deposition, a lady who brought a case against him for sexual, that he gave testimony that was legally accurate is a total falsehood. The idea that the definition of sex did not include oral sex and they did not ask the right questions, and if they did, he would have told the truth, offends me. This idea of what sex meant came up after this blue dress, in my opinion. The reason I say that is that on January the 17th, when he was asked to testify about his relationship with Monica Lewinsky, he knew she had provided an affidavit denying any improper relationship of any kind whatsoever. He believed himself to be covered. He did not know of the tapes. Whether you like the tapes or not, he did not know of them, and without them, he would have lied with Monica Lewinsky to the prejudice of a citizen who was suing him for conduct, if true, should be enough to impeach him. We shall never know what happened in that room in Arkansas, or that hotel room. Two people know, and God knows. Why I believe the definition of sex as being propounded by the President to this very day is a lie is based on the conduct he exhibited after the deposition. On January the 17th, he would have us to believe they did not ask the right question and the definition excluded oral sex. I would suggest to you that's a fabricated tale. that on January the 24th, we have a talking point paper from the White House telling people how to respond about the allegations against the president, and one of those questions was, does sexual relations include oral sex? The answer was yes.
The gentleman's time has expired. Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I'm talked in 30-second sound bites so long, I've never had this much time. Thank you very much. I can't believe 10 minutes went by so quick. What I believe is that his press accounts to Mr. Lair and to roll call indicate that in proper relationships, there was no artificial definition. This is oral sex is not included. I believe that's a falsehood. That's a fraud. I believe that he knew Ms. Linsky's affidavit was false, and that when the discussion with Mr. Bennett came up in the deposition, he was following intently what happened, and that he was not surprised, and that he did, in fact, lie to the grand jury on numerous occasions. Should he be impeached? Very quickly. The hardest decision I think I will ever make. Knowing that the president lied to a grand jury about sex, I still believe that every president of the United States, regardless of the matter they're called to testify about before a grand jury, should testify truthfully, and if they don't, they should be subject to losing their job. I believe that about Bill Clinton. I believe that about the next president. If it had been a Republican, I would have still believed that. I would hope that if a Republican president had done all this, that some of us had went over and told him, you need to leave office. I understand the dilemma that all of us are in about that. His fate is in his own hands. Right quickly, Mr. Chairman, 30 years from now, they're going to judge what we've done and how partisan it's been and whether or not this made any sense. I just want you to know, as you look back and look at these tapes and find out what we're doing, there's one member of Congress, there's a lot of us here believe the president has lied to us to this very day, that we can't reconcile ourselves with that it was in a lawsuit with an average everyday citizen, legal rights at stake. And the most chilling of all things to me was the episode after he left the deposition. He told Mr. Blumenthal that the Monica Lewinsky was basically coming on to him. He had to fight her off. He told Betty Curry, she wanted to have sex with me and I couldn't do that. The most chilling thing was, for a period of time, the president was setting stories in motion that were lies. Those stories found themselves in the press to attack a young lady who could potentially be a witness against him. To me, that is very much like Watergate. That shows character inconsistent with being president, and every member of Congress should look at that episode and decide, is this truly about sex? Is Bill Clinton doing the right thing by continuing to make us have to pursue this, have to prove to a legal certainty he lied? The president's fate is in his own hands. Mr. President, you have one more chance. Don't bite your lip. Reconcile yourself with the law. I yield back. Well beyond my time.
I thank the gentleman, the distinguished lady from California.
Mr. Chairman, I want to first thank the American people for giving me the opportunity to speak this morning on the most important issue I will ever face as a member of Congress. Yet after sitting through the many days of hearings and hours of testimony, I can also understand why much of the country has become somewhat immune to this issue. Obviously, we all wish we could put this matter behind us. But I do not have the luxury of doing that. I have a constitutional duty to review the facts, and no matter how difficult or even unpopular my decision might be, in the end, I must vote my conscience based on the evidence and the law. And although the White House spin machine has tried to place the blame for these proceedings on Judge Starr or the committee majority, I can tell you that after reviewing the evidence and listening to the President's testimony, the reason we are here is because, unfortunately, the President of the United States lied to the American people and a federal grand jury, and then he attempted to use the full power of the White House to cover it up. Then, instead of trying to present a credible defense that respected the intelligence of the American people, the White House and its allies used their spin machine to attack its opponents and destroy reputations. Not until the possibility of impeachment became real to the White House in the last few days did they bother to address the facts or the truth. In the real world of everyday Americans, people who break the law face consequences. That is what our founders intended when they drafted a constitution and established the rule of law as a framework for our society. And when a president attempts to weave his way through the rule of law to cover up a lie, he puts the Constitution itself on trial. Like so many others, I am disappointed that the office of the presidency has been reduced in stature by the legal hair-splitting and stonewalling that the president and his lawyers have engaged in for the past 7 months. According to his own defenders, the president engaged in sinful actions that were morally wrong. So many twisted definitions of a very simple fact. The President of the United States committed perjury before a federal grand jury. He tried to convince the American people that the improper behavior he engaged in with a young subordinate was really not sex, at least not according to the definition provided to him by the court. I'm sure that every husband or wife knows in their heart that their spouse would consider what he did sex. And certainly, even young children recognize that he lied about it. How can anyone look their children in the eye and tell them that they must tell the truth after they see the President of the United States lie to the entire nation on television? He abused his power as chief executive to protect himself at the expense of his family, his friends, his cabinet, and sadly, the American people. I do believe the public deserves a president who adheres to a higher principle, and I'm not afraid to admit that. It is what our forefathers fought and died for. It is what our veterans risked their lives for. It is what we all pray for our children. President Kennedy, who was President Clinton's boyhood hero, said in the days before his assassination that it is, quote, the responsibility of the president to carry out and execute the laws of the country, and that whoever is president will do the same, because if he did not, he would begin to unwind this most extraordinary constitutional system. So I strongly believe in fulfilling my oath, end quote, and that concerns me greatly. If we just look the other way and allow a president to abuse his authority and betray his oath by committing, at the very least, perjury, the public trust in our constitutional system will be forever diminished. Today, the president's lawyers asked us to put an end to this process for the good of the nation. If the president had really wanted to save the nation the turmoil of this past year, he should have been more truthful or forthcoming from the beginning. Or, as some have already suggested, he could have simply resigned. So I say to the president today, if you really believe that this process will cause our nation irreparable harm, I ask you, for the good of the nation, resign and spare our country a lengthy and divisive impeachment process. The simple truth is that this issue would not even be before us if the president simply told the truth or settled with Paula Jones in the beginning, rather than telling his political operatives that they would just have to win instead. The pursuit of the truth cannot be avoided simply because it involves an uncomfortable issue like sex. And I've got news for you. Whatever you do that is wrong is going to be embarrassing when people find out about it. To avoid dealing with the truth because it makes people uncomfortable would be particularly hurtful to any and all women who must deal with cases of harassment. And that is a real fear that I have. In fact, this case is largely about one woman being denied her day in court, about a White House that uses all of its resources to intimidate witnesses and obscure the facts. That is one reason why so many Americans have lost faith in our legal system. The lesson women learned from the Paula Jones case is not to challenge a powerful person, certainly not someone who has the best lawyers and the resources of a nation at his disposal. Believe me, the example this sends is that any person who challenges a figure of authority is going to be subjected to all types of abuse. Let me tell you, that is a very scary message. Another concern that is very scary is the effect the president's behavior will have on our national security. Just a few months ago, I found myself, along with many other Americans and even the media, wondering if our strike against terrorism was life-imitating art or a genuine response to a terrorist organization. Just the thought that the possibility existed that the president was engaging in a wag-the-dog scenario was chilling and profoundly disappointing. As a nation, we deserve better. You know, a lot of people ask me if I'm concerned about voting to impeach a popular president. They talk about his high approval ratings and the polls that say most Americans oppose impeachment. But I cannot allow my decision to be based on a president's popularity or the numbers in a poll. History will judge us on the facts. And I want future generations to look at the evidence and say that what we did was based on the law and upon our constitutional duty. I know that the President is a very likable man. I understand why people want this issue to just go away. But the issue we are facing is at the very core of our constitutional system. And while many people may like this President, I hope that they love their country more. Because that is what I will base my vote on. My love for this country and on our Constitution. If we do not uphold its principles, the foundation of our system of government will be undermined forever. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your leadership and your fairness throughout these entire hearings in this process. And I want to echo the sentiments of Congressman Graham that it has been truly an honor to serve with each and every member on this panel. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
I certainly thank the gentlelady. I wish that was the ultimate opening statement, but it was but the penultimate. I have my opening statement, which I have not delivered, and if you will indulge me, I will now make my opening statement. Perjury is not sex. Obstruction is not sex. Abuse of power is not about sex. It's important to understand that none of the proposed articles include allegations of sexual misconduct. The President is not accused of marital infidelity because such conduct is essentially private. But when circumstances require you to participate in a formal court proceeding and under oath mislead the parties and the court by lying, that is a public act and deserves public sanction. Perjury is a crime with a 5-year penalty. Now, what all this boils down to is, what do we think of the oath? Is it a ceremonial formality, or does it mean something? We were told there are 3 pillars to the rule of law: an honest judiciary, an ethical bar, and an enforceable oath. And this is why the President's lying under oath is so serious. It is an assault on the rule of law. It cheapens the oath. It is a breach of promise to tell the truth. It subverts our system of government. Now, the Democrats have what really amounts to the so what defense, well articulated in yesterday's Wall Street Journal op-ed page, where a pundit states Mr. Clinton's behavior has been disgraceful, but it hasn't involved actions against the state. Okay. A compendium of prominent Democrats who agree the President lied under oath is long and distinguished, and I have it here, but all of them insist the President's lies do not rise to the level of impeachment. I suggest impeachment is like beauty, apparently in the eye of the beholder, but I hold a different view, and it's not a vengeful one, it's not vindictive, and it's not craven. It's just a concern for the Constitution and a high respect for the rule of law. Now, as to the charge that we have produced no witnesses whose credibility could be tested by cross-examination. Well, we had Monica Lewinsky's testimony under oath, her immunity grant in jeopardy if she lied. We accepted her heavily corroborated testimony. I hate to bring up the stained dress again, but we didn't feel the need to bring her in for more testimony. But if the Democrats had the slightest qualm about her credibility, why didn't they invite her to testify or take her deposition to have her credibility tested? Betty Curry, we had her testimony under oath. Vernon Jordan, we had his testimony under oath. If there were any questions, why the Democrats could have called them as witnesses. But all we got from them was a covey of professors, no fact witnesses. We based our facts, the ones we were willing to accept, on 60,000 pages of sworn testimony, deposition transcripts, grand jury testimony, all under oath and all available to the Democrats. If they doubted this testimony, they were free to take depositions or produce them as witnesses. They did not. So I wonder about the complaints that they didn't get a chance to test the credibility of the witnesses. Now, as a lawyer and a legislator for most of my very long life, I have a particular reverence for our legal system. It protects the innocent, It punishes the guilty. It defends the powerless. It guards freedom. It summons the noblest instincts of the human spirit. The rule of law protects you and it protects me from the midnight fire on our roof or the 3 a.m. knock on our door. It challenges abusive authority. It's a shame darkness at noon is forgotten or the Gulag archipelago, but there is such a thing lurking out in the world called abusive authority, and the rule of law is what protects you from it. And so it's a matter of considerable concern to me when our legal system is assaulted by our nation's chief law enforcement officer, the only person obliged to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. Now, we suffer from an abundance of details, but it's clear we have, as the National Journal said, not an occasional minor garden variety perjury, but multiple acts of perjury. We have calculated lawlessness which takes us for fools and chips away at our legal system. Lies about sex are one thing. Lies under oath by the nation's chief law enforcement officer are another. Why do we bother to argue the facts? So many of you, certainly not all, but so many of you have pleaded nolo contendere. So our debate is whether multiple violations of a solemn oath deserve censure or removal. Incidentally, where did you get your facts on censure? From the Star Report? What concerns me most deeply in sorting out the many arguments here is the significance of the oath. When the President performs the public act of asking God to witness his promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, that is not trivial. Whether it's a civil suit or before the grand jury, the significance of the oath cannot and must not be cheapened if our proud boast that we're a government of laws and not of men is to mean anything. I submit it means everything. It was purchased for us by the lives of countless patriots, some of whom are resting across the Potomac River in a cemetery, but all of whom put the nation's good ahead of their own. A few words about fairness. I have been relentlessly accused of being unfair. I can only say I have tried. I have tried and I have tried. We have labored under an artificial time constraint, but one that I adopted back before the election when the spirit of the age was get this over with. Get this behind us. The country doesn't want this to be dragged out over the next coming year. I bought into that. I agreed it was in the interest of the country, the President, and the Congress to move this along as fast as we could. And I believed we could finish it by the end of the year. That was naive. There are so many things left undone because of time constraints. But now that the election is over, and now that the Democrats, and by the way, we did not want to do anything just before the election for fear of being accused of trying to politicize our activities. So we held back. But now that the Democrats have picked up some seats, we hear the phrase lame duck Congress. Well, we can't have it both ways. We're trying to finish this decently, honorably, fairly, within time constraints, because I don't want this to spill over into next year. I don't want this to be an endless process. I think it's in the interest of the country to finish it, and we have tried our level best, and I have tried to grant every request the Democrats have made. Maybe we haven't succeeded, but I have certainly tried. Now, we seek impeachment, not conviction, nor censure. Those are decisions for the other body, the Senate. We merely decide if there is enough for a trial. The accusatory body should not be the adjudicatory body. Barbara Jordan pointed out it was a wise decision not to have the House that charges be the one that tries. That doesn't mean we don't take our responsibility seriously, but it means we have a different role. Now, we're told an impeachment trial would be too divisive and too disruptive, that it would reverse two elections. We're not reversing any election. Bob Dole will not end up President of the United States if there is an impeachment. We are following a process wisely set down as a check and balance on executive overreaching by our founding fathers. This vote says something about us. It answers the question, just who are we and what do we stand for? Is the president one of us, or is he a sovereign? We vote for our honor, which is the only thing we get to take with us to the grave. I yield back the balance of my time. Now, that concludes the opening statements mercifully. Before we recess for 30 minutes, I want to explain the procedure which we will follow when we reconvene. Pending is a resolution exhibiting articles of impeachment and a motion to favorably report the resolution. Under a previous order of the committee, the second reading of the resolution has been dispensed with. We will proceed with the amendment process, article by article. Therefore, when we return Article 1, when we return from this recess, Article 1 will be open for amendment. After all amendments to Article 1 are completed, we'll have a final vote on Article 1. If any article is adopted, the original motion shall be considered as adopted, and any approved article of impeachment will automatically be favorably reported to the House. We will then consider the remaining articles and follow the same procedure. If there are no amendments to any articles, but members wish to be heard on that particular article, they'll be recognized under the to strike the last word. So you will have an opportunity to speak. And with that announcement,
Mr. Chairman, just for
the gentleman
clarification.
will state his parliamentary.
I believe I understood it, but I want to make it clear because I wasn't sure of this at first. There will therefore only be one vote on an article, and if an article on its first reading gets a majority vote, there will be no need to re-vote. There will not be a subsequent vote ratifying that. So it will in effect be treating these as if they were four separate things to be reported to the House.
Exactly.
Mr. Chairman.
Who's Mr. Scott?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the status of the responses from Mr. Starr. One of the amendments that I have to offer depends pretty much on his answer.
Well, I'm advised we have phoned them, and they are working on the answers. We will rephone them during the recess and see if we can't move it along. Ms. Waters.
I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a letter to me and perhaps to others from Alan Dershowitz, one of the panelists, expert panelists who testified here relative to an exchange that took place between Mr. Barr, Mr. Dershowitz, and Mr. Hickenbotham, and a copy of the article that Mr. Dershowitz was referring to as it relates to Mr. Barr.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Thank you very much.
All right, the gentleman from Michigan.
A unanimous consent request for a letter from William Alden McDaniel, Jr., Esquire, to Congressman Bob Barr, copy to me, with attachments I'd like to
Is there any objection?
Mr. Chairman, can we just get Mr. Barr's receptionist to send us some of this stuff directly? It might save some committee time.
What? He wants to know if your receptionist would send this material directly to him.
To the gentleman from Massachusetts?
I think it was a facetious request.
Oh.
I will treat it as such and ignore it.
Mr. Chairman,
All right, without objection.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like unanimous consent to insert into the record a letter I've sent to all members of the committee in response to the materials being circulated by Mr. Dershowitz.
That shall be done without objection too, and the committee will stand in recess for 30 minutes.
All right, we're hearing a bit of lightheartedness, a little banter there between the chairman and various members of Congress as they wrap up procedural undertakings. They're now going into a 30-minute break. We, of course, will pick up the hearings as soon as they resume. They're going to enter into the markup phase where they begin to debate the wording of any articles of impeachment and ultimately voting on those articles. Hi, I'm Catherine Cryer. I moved into the anchor seat for the next couple of hours. If you think there's a lot of activity in that hearing room, guess what's going on behind the scenes? A lot of frenetic activity, and Julie Kurtz is up on Capitol Hill to tell us about it. Julie?
Well, really, there is no suspense in the actual committee because we do expect the Judiciary Committee to vote on and approve at least one article of impeachment today and vote on the remaining articles probably spreading into Saturday. So after this break, as you mentioned, they start the nuts and bolts work of actually looking at each of those 4 articles, 2 charges of perjury, then the obstruction of justice, and then the abuse of power, and deciding how those exactly should be worded and whether amendments should be added on to them. Now, the bottom line is there is solid support on the committee from Republicans for the perjury charge. Majority of the people on that committee believe that the president, in fact, did lie under oath. Let's hear from some of the closing statements by the members. First, Republican Lindsey Graham, and then Robert Wexler, a Democrat. Here's what they said earlier.
The president's fate is in his own hands. Mr. President, you have one more chance. Don't bite your lip. Reconcile yourself with the law.
Wake up, America. Our government is about to shut down. The public's business will grind to a halt. The Senate, the Supreme Court, and the House of Representatives will all be hostage to a process that never should have been triggered in the first place.
The real suspense will be the vote in the full House expected next week. Democratic sources are telling Fox News they believe the only way Republicans can be swayed is if the president meets with them in person. Catherine.
All right, Julie, we're going to take a quick break and right back to you. Stay with us.
This program is brought to you by Centrum, always complete from A to Zinc.
Whether you're working out, working hard, or making changes, one thing is for certain. Centrum has your nutrition needs covered. With Centrum, you benefit from what science is discovering about how vitamins and minerals help maintain health, unlock energy, and strengthen immunity. Centrum, always complete from A to Zinc. And Centrum Kids' great new taste is making a splash with new fruit flavors kids love.
I'm looking at a dress and an address.
5:30, be there.
Jack, you know I hate surprises.
For surprising strength, without all those messy white marks, their secret sheer dry. pH balanced for a woman's chemistry.
So, what is this all about?
10 years ago, our first date, we met right here. You wore that little black dress. I want to live the whole night again.
I love it. Of course, that means you'll be sleeping alone.
I thought we could rewrite history a little.
When I did laundry, I felt it looked fine, nothing was missing. Didn't want to spend more time, then I put a little Downy in the Downy ball. Couldn't believe how soft and great clothes look. It's easy to have it all.
Pour and drop it in. The spin cycle opens it. Then Downy rinses deep, helping protect clothes so they feel and look better than without softener. And now it's even easier. Get the Downy Care Starter Kit.
It's Downy and the ball, so easy to have it all.
For most anything that ails your stomach this season, give it peace and goodwill with Pepto-Bismol.
You've seen magnetic bracelets on professional athletes. You've admired them on Hollywood celebrities. Now, for the first time on national television, it's Homedic's new magnetic wave therapy bracelet. Quality crafted from the finest alloys, these 24-karat biomagnetic spheres feature revolutionary magnetic wave technology believed to enhance performance. The magnets create a powerful magnetic field to help energize your entire body. Each bracelet is ergonomically designed for maximum comfort, outstanding control, and sheer unsurpassed beauty. Fully adjustable for him, for her. You won't believe how good you'll look, how good you'll feel. You've seen similar-looking bracelets in catalogs for $100 or more. Now you can possess the Homedics Magnetic Therapy Bracelet for only $19.95. Homedics, the leader in magnetic therapy.
To order your Homedics Magnetic Wave Therapy Bracelet for only $19.95, call 1-800-588-9922. Enjoy the benefits of magnetic therapy today. Call 1-800-588-9922 now.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the impeachment hearings. Right before the break, we were talking to Julie Kurtz up on Capitol Hill, and I think she has a guest with her now. Julie?
Robert Wexler, who we just heard from a little earlier in his closing statement. We showed a clip from that. He joins us now during this break from the Judiciary Committee proceedings. What do you think at this point the president could possibly do to change votes in the full House among those moderate, wavering Republicans? Can he do anything?
I don't know that he can. I guess supposedly the only thing he could do is once again speak to the American people and explain his behavior and explain his contrition and explain his motivation and what was in his head throughout this whole process.
Give me a sense of what you're thinking and feeling up there as you listen to these closing statements. It doesn't appear that any minds are changed in the committee at all.
No, I mean, clearly people, I'm not going to impugn anyone's motives on the committee, but clearly I think people have had a position from the beginning and they have stuck to it. From the point of view of those that think impeachment is not appropriate here, I thought the president's defense by Mr. Ruff and by Mr. Lowell yesterday was extraordinary. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand how a case has been made for impeaching the President of the United States. I just don't understand it.
Do you believe that a Democratic-sponsored censure resolution will be able to be voted on in the full House at this point?
Well, I think Mr. Barrett and our committee said it best. Every member of Congress ought to get the opportunity to express their conscience on this matter. And just like the Republicans will get to vote on impeachment, the Democrats and everyone else ought to get to vote on censure. And for the Republican leadership in Congress not to allow that vote, if they don't, I think tells the American people just what they expect, that this is a partisan exercise. If they're not afraid of people voting their conscience, then let us vote on censure.
Are you surprised that the president isn't coming out at this point and saying anything more publicly, making a public statement? We heard last night that he met with his advisors about possibly doing that.
I'm not surprised. Let's keep this in context. It was just the last 2 days that the president's lawyer and the minority counsel got an opportunity to plead the president's case, to plead the defense. That has happened. The Republicans on the committee have voiced their intention. Now, the president will have to gauge what he needs to say, if anything, to the American people.
Thank you, Congressman Wexler, for joining us. We mentioned that Democratic-sponsored censure resolution, and chances of it having a vote in the full House look dim at this point because Republicans and those who support impeachment are afraid, say they're afraid, that that would attract too many of the fence-sitters away from voting for the articles of impeachment. Catherine?
Julie, you talked to Congressman Wexler about what the president could do publicly to change minds. What about privately? Because we're certainly hearing reports, certainly Republicans, how they're rallying their members, but also the White House getting on the phone, of course, but other tactics that some, including Congressman Barr, are saying borders on tampering with members of Congress.
Well, not only are members of the administration calling up members of Congress, but also those closely associated with the White House, unions, business leaders that are supportive of the president have been making phone calls to members of Congress, trying to persuade them to oppose impeachment. Joe Lockhart at the White House, the press secretary for the president this morning, told reporters that the president himself had not made phone calls in the last few days. But of course, members of his administration are in fact doing that. And Republicans, moderate wavering Republicans, are expected to go on the trip to the Middle East with him. So he'll have a chance, supposedly, to talk with them one-on-one during this trip. He leaves on Saturday about the situation. Whether that can make a difference, of course, is the question. What can the president say at this point that he hasn't said? But of course, we know that he can be very persuasive in person.
All right, Julie Kurtz on Capitol Hill, thanks very much. Let's check in and see what's going on at the White House. Brian Wilson is standing by. Brian.
Hi, Catherine. You know, earlier today we had a chance to talk with Joe Lockhart, as we do most every day here at the White House, and a couple of things came out of our morning meeting with him. And first of all, he makes a very, very strong statement that there is nothing planned here at the White House by the president in the way of a statement regarding impeachment. You know, last night there was apparently something floating around, a statement that had been apparently drafted by someone over here. Well, that all turned out to be something that the president had not even seen or considered. And we're told that today, as it stands at this hour, the president is not intending to talk about the issue of impeachment before he departs on his trip to the Middle East. He's scheduled to leave out of here early tomorrow morning, and nothing seems to be on the horizon. That could always change here very quickly, but nothing is on the horizon as we see it today, and no indication that the First Lady is going to have anything to say about this. There's been also some talk that many people would like to see the First Lady get out and defend the president publicly again, that might be helpful here. The president apparently has not been making phone calls, we are told, to those moderate Republicans who are apparently on the fence, the people who really hold his fate in their hands as they decide how they're going to vote in the days ahead. It does seem certain that the articles of impeachment will be approved by the committee, and many people think that only 3 to 5 votes in the House could sway this thing one way or the other. So you would imagine there's a great deal of temptation to get out there and talk to the people who could make the big difference, but we are told reliably from Joe Lockhart that the president is not making those phone calls. Catherine?
Brian, had the list been released of those attending the Middle East trip with the president? In other words, you know, a lot of moderate Republicans were invited along, Rick Lazio, others. Who has decided to go with him?
We have not seen the official list yet. That was asked of Joe Lockhart. He said he will be providing it later today, and then we could make our own determination if these were people who were on the so-called list of moderate Republicans.
And also, you said that the president hasn't been making calls to these moderate Republicans, but certainly we're hearing reports about everything from union officials to CEOs of major corporations going out and doing this, some would say, in his stead.
Yes, there definitely is an understanding here at the White House that is going on. They are not saying that they are making an organized effort to have their friends and supporters doing it, but they realize that their friends and supporters nonetheless understand that their president is in trouble, and it makes a lot of sense that they would go out and do that. But it doesn't appear to be orchestrated by the president at this time. We can find nothing that conclusively points to that.
And one last quick question, Brian. When does he leave? When does he return from this trip? Because it certainly would leave available time if he still wished to address the nation or members of Congress.
Yes, indeed. That's the point that I think is most important to leave our little conversation with. Though he is leaving early tomorrow morning, it is a very short trip, and he certainly will be back before the House votes on articles of impeachment on, I believe it's now scheduled for next Thursday in the full House of Representatives, if things move along as we think they will. And certainly, if he wanted to have a great deal of impact and he wanted to say one more time that he's very sorry about all this and make any kind of statement that he would like to make, the maximum point of impact would be like Wednesday night, an address to the nation. So I would look for something like that to happen, if it's going to happen at all. It may well be the decision of this White House to let the chips fall where they may.
All right, Brian Wilson at the White House. Thanks very much.
You bet.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more.
Let's say the puppy's a salesperson in an average computer store. Now, ask the salesperson a question.
What's the difference between DVD and CD-ROM? How much RAM do I really need? Oh, and can you guys install software? Okay, thanks.
We built a different place to buy a computer. Gateway Country, staffed with trained people who'll have a computer built just for you, starting as low as $9.99. Gateway Country. Get more out of the box. Drop by any store or call 1-800-GATEWAY.
When it comes to hairspray, the competition's stiff. The competition's sticky. The competition can't hold up to Pantene Pro V hairspray with Elastess. Other hairsprays are just no match for Pro V. Only Pro V has Elastess, so it holds this well, feels this good, and bounces right back into place. Pantene Pro V Flexible Hold Hairspray, the only one with Elastess. The best hold, the best feel, the best of both worlds. No competition.
This holiday season, after years of sacrifice, these families are opening something they never had before. The door to their very own home.
Hey, what's the matter? Oh. Huh? Yeah. Thank you.
The holidays can be stressful, even on a diaper. So make sure it's Love's. They're so good on leaks, they're now guaranteed with this no leaks phone number. So live and learn and then get Love's.
Please.
For happier holidays, guaranteed.
Welcome back. For only the third time in history, articles of impeachment have in fact been drafted. Congressman Hyde, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, will come back to the hearing room, we understand, in about 15 minutes, where they will begin marking up those articles, possibly voting on them today. And of course, we have to ask ourselves, will this result in the impeachment of the President of the United States? I have several guests to discuss this with, but just to give you a heads up, we're waiting on the President to make an appearance in the Rose Garden to talk about relief efforts regarding Hurricane Mitch. We don't anticipate he's going to address what's been going on in the Judiciary Committee, but we will go to that and let you know what he has to say when he takes to the podium. In the meantime, joining me here in studio is Fox News legal contributor Andrew Napolitano, Judge Napolitano, and we've also got in Washington Republican strategist Rob Waters and political strategist and attorney Scott Siegel. Welcome, gentlemen. Judge, let me start with you. It seems to me, listening to all of the members of the Judiciary Committee, that the debate really has been joined. We've heard enough Democrats now say the president lied under oath. We've heard the president's defenders during the last couple of days say perjury as a generic offense can in fact be an impeachable defense. Right. So the debate we expect to hear in the House then is what?
Whether or not this type of perjury rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors. And anyone educated in the law and anyone familiar with common sense knows there's no distinctions amongst perjury, whether you lie about a state secret or whether you lie about what you did in your bedroom. When you take an oath to tell the truth, the failure to comply with that oath strikes at the integrity of the entire judicial system. What's interesting, and what happened earlier this week, and we talked about it during the break, is that some of the president's strongest defenders, some intellectuals and some politicians, concede that perjury is a high crime and misdemeanor. And some of his other strongest defenders concede that he lied under oath. But not all of them will concede that this type of perjury is sufficient to challenge him in the Senate.
Well, it's quite interesting. Scott Siegel, we heard two civilians, two citizens who had been prosecuted for perjury, convicted of perjury, one in a strikingly similar case as a result of a sexual harassment suit. How do we make distinctions saying that similar, almost identical perjury in the case of the president would therefore not be impeachable?
Catherine, we don't have to make that distinction. The Constitution, as Judge Napolitano knows, the Constitution doesn't say the word perjury with reference to impeachment. The Constitution describes treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. The important element there is that treason and bribery describe the type, the genus, if you will, of the types of high crimes and misdemeanors. To say that there's no distinctions made within the Constitution is flatly wrong. The word high, for example, is inserted to make a distinction that there are differences among crimes and differences among misdemeanors that should be used as the basis of an impeachment proceeding. And so I think what the real debate is what happened with respect to the Lewinsky case. Does that bootstrap the accusation of perjury into the type of constitutionally significant high crime and misdemeanor? It does not, because it does not go to the heart of the office. It does not go to the constitutional function, like, for example, Watergate did.
Let me interrupt you for just a moment, Scott, just so everyone watching at home. The president is now coming out into the Rose Garden, approaching the podium, and as I told you earlier, he's meeting with Central American leaders to discuss aid to various countries that were hit very, very hard by Hurricane Mitch. He also, I think, is going to discuss a trip he plans to Central America early next year to supervise those relief efforts. There certainly had been some talk that the president might take the opportunity to offer up some sort of apology or remark, but White House spokesman Joe Lockhart said this morning that was not going to happen. We see the pictures there. We're going to continue our conversation. If we obviously hear of any such remarks, we'll go immediately to the Rose Garden and listen to the president. Scott, if you'll hold just a minute, because I'll throw a little more meat out there for you with Judge Napolitano. Judge, I heard one of the congressmen, and right now I can't recall who it was, and it may have been Asa Hutchinson, talking about perjury as a high crime and misdemeanor, and that in fact when you look to the penal code, you see that perjury and bribery are dealt with in the same fashion. And I would think that to bribe someone to alter testimony in a court, to bribe a judge to affect the outcome of a case, is very similar in character to bribing yourself, if you will, to changing your own testimony to affect the outcome in a case.
No one has ever suggested that the Constitution purports to list every crime which rises to the level of impeachment. And I do agree with Scott that it lists the type of crime, the level of crime, the seriousness of crime that would constitute a basis for impeachment. Bribery is mentioned. Treason is mentioned. Perjury is a like crime in that it affects the integrity of the entire judicial branch of the government. Every morning in every state in the Union, from Monday through Friday, thousands of people take an oath to tell the truth, whether it's in a deposition, whether it's in a criminal case, a civil case, a matrimonial case, or an administrative hearing. The whole system is based upon the belief that they will comply with that oath and tell the truth. If they don't, and if they happen to be the chief law enforcement officer of the land, that's a significant assault on a fundamental tenet of the system.
I want to agree with Andrew. Perjury can be a high crime or misdemeanor. Nobody is saying that it cannot be. But the question is what type of perjury. And here is where the distinction with bribery becomes very, very important. What bribery does is call into question the president's loyalty to his office and loyalty to the country, the loyalty to the constitutional office. If the perjury were of a type or character which made those similar judgments come to the fore, then it would be the basis for a high crime or misdemeanor and would be the basis for impeachment. This perjury is not that kind of perjury. In fact, the situation under which this perjury derived is highly suspicious, very close to entrapment.
Okay, Scott, I hate to interrupt you because we've got Julie Kurtz sitting by on Capitol Hill, and I think she's got another guest with her, Julie.
No problem.
To balance things out, we have Republican Charles Kennedy, a Republican from Florida, to ask him a few questions. Is there solid support on the committee for all of the charges, all four draft article of impeachment, or just the perjury?
I can't speak for my colleagues on that, and frankly, I don't know exactly how the individual votes will come out on the particular articles. I do believe that the overwhelming majority of the Republicans support all four articles. But we may have some of the members who have made a judgment that there's not sufficient evidence on certain elements of the articles, and of course that's the way the process should work. And we're going to now go through a process of debating the articles one by one, and during that process members will express their views and we'll have an opportunity to consider amendments, and the committee will work its will.
Do you think that any difference would be made by strengthening a censure resolution, adding a fine onto it? Would that gather more support in the full House from some wavering members?
Well, it's possible that there would be some people who would be attracted to fining the president. I think it's a terrible idea. The Congress does not have the authority to fine the president because we don't like his conduct or have made a judgment that his conduct was inappropriate. That is unconstitutional, and we should not do that. I believe that the whole idea of censure is a bad idea. It is outside the framework established by the Constitution, and we have a duty to stay within that framework. Even though that something may appeal to people as being a better idea, I think we should stick with the wisdom of the founders and follow the constitutional standards.
Charles Kennedy, thank you very much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
And Catherine, again, the committee will be coming back in about 10 minutes to begin the work of actually voting on those articles of impeachment. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Julie Kurtz. We're going to take a quick break. We're back with much more right after this.
For an enjoyable weekend, avoid things like alarm clocks.
box. Instead, grab a big Grand Cinnamon Roll.
What better way to unwind than by enjoying a hot, fresh Grand Cinnamon Roll?
They're not just big, they're grands. Woohoo!